crazy. It's like Mordor.
Yeah. It was and as you mentioned, your youngest was really stressed. That night when my daughter saw those flames, she was almost immobile as we were packing up the car. Like I had to hug her and say, look, we just need to get the car set so we can get out of here. And so we didn't have to evacuate.
Right.
However, if you've been following me, then you know that I have my mom, my mother-in-law, and my 100-year-old bedridden grandmother who all live very close to me and who we help support. You know, we're in that sandwich generation. On today's Harness the Power of Planning podcast, Natascha and I talk about our experiences, our family's experiences really, with the LA wildfires that are still burning, although much better than they were last week. And then we talk a little bit about what we've been doing to manage our family's mental health during this period. And then at the very end, we have 2 packing tips. If you ever have to evacuate, hopefully these tips will be helpful for you on episode 88 of the Harness the Power of Planning podcast, starting now. Hi, everyone. Happy Thursday. Alegre and Natascha of Beyond Your Wildest Dreams here with our live cast that, as always, we put up as the Harness the Power of Planning podcast. If you've joined us before, then you know that we are all about helping you to prioritize yourself and your goals, because we know as working moms, it can be so easy to put yourself dead last. I guess there's a reason it's called dead last, because you're dead from putting yourself last.
Mm-hmm.
And if you haven't seen, we have this bouquet of books. There's 4 of them, and they're all designed to help you prioritize yourself and your goals. There are 45 minutes to go through, and they're workbooks because we want you to learn as you go. And, you know, if you don't know where to start, we would say to start with 3, 2, 1, done. This is all about getting your to-do list done by using brain science to have an actual framework for your to-do list rather than just what should I do next? And so, yeah, get those. I'll put up a link. And as always, if you're commenting live or if you're commenting after you see the recording, feel free to comment. We look at the comments. We will get back to you. And thank you for being here. And today we're going to talk about, so I'm trying to find the link to our books and I'm not seeing it, but here's the link to one book, and I'm sure you can find all the rest if you go to that one. But Natascha and I today are going to talk about our family's experiences with the LA wildfires because
this is what's going on in our lives.
Yeah.
It's taken over.
Yeah.
It's
impossible to ignore.
Yeah. And I think even on a national level, right, to some degree, I had people from all over the country calling me and texting me and finding out, you know, so it definitely was on a national scope.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's not over.
No, it's not over. But before we start talking about that, I did manage to put on a shirt and put on earrings. Last week, I didn't even manage that. I do want to pull a card because I have really been loving pulling these cards. So let's see what the magic box has for us today. Oh, I love this quote. This is actually one of my favorite quotes. A year from now, you will wish you had started today. Karen Lamb. It's actually in one of our books, that quote.
A, that's in one of our books. And B, it's the beginning of the year. And what a great time to, you know, we're not talking about resolutions, talking about creating habits or starting threally that, think about yourself a year from now, how bummed you would be if you hadn't started the thing that's itching in the back of your mind. Like, oh, I really want to do that thing. Another year is gone. Didn't do it.
Yeah. Cause you know, there's a saying in the productivity world that we overestimate what we can do in a day and we underestimate what we can do in a year.
Mm-hmm.
I actually recently, so if you've listened to our podcast before, you know that my cholesterol has been going up. And late last summer, I got the blood test that finally said, okay, now you need to pay attention. Your cholesterol is officially over the healthy zone. And I said to myself, okay, managing my own expectations and knowing that you can't change things in the day, but you can change things in a year. I said, I'm going to make changes today. And in 1 year, I'm going to reassess what those changes have done for me. And you know what? It also just kind of takes the pressure off you when you have that longer time span.
Yeah. And just to say, y'all, Alegre lives pretty healthily. And this is just a fact of what happens in perimenopause. Yeah. It's just what happens, like
It's true.
Your women's cholesterol, you could be super healthy and you will find that your cholesterol is increasing because your estrogen is decreasing. But lo and behold, your estrogen was one of those things that kept those bad cholesterol numbers in check. So,
because your body actually uses the cholesterol to make those hormones. So guess what? Your body stops making those hormones and your cholesterol naturally is just going to go up because it's not getting used up.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
And so I made these radical changes immediately because I had already been thinking about it. I'd already been knowing like for a while, like, I'm going to have to do something about this at some point. So I did make some radical changes, and I was able to get blood tests taken 2 months later, and my numbers had gone down.
So you didn't even have to wait a year.
I didn't have to wait, but they still weren't in the healthy range. They still all weren't in the healthy range. They had gone, I just wanted to pump myself. Like I made these radical changes, and I wanted some proof that they were working because they weren't easy changes to make. And so I just kind of wanted to pump myself up with like, yes, this is the right direction.
Yeah.
But even if the numbers had only moved a smidge, I would have been happy because my thought was on the next year, right? So that's what's so great about this quote. A year from now, you will wish you had started today. So what is it that you want to move the needle on? And if you have a paper planner, which Natascha and I are big fans of the paper planner, mine literally sits right in front of me all day long. Here it is. Why not write on December 31st? Hey, how did I do on this thing that I said I wanted to make progress on January 16th? Why not?
Right. Check in.
Yeah, check in, because a year from now, you will wish you had started today. So, yay. Think about it. Actually, let's talk about this some more after we talk about our wildfire experiences, because I know you've gotten to hear about my experience a little bit last week, but Natascha had no power. So, Natascha, tell us about your family's LA wildfire experience.
Yeah, we had no power for 3 days. Now, 3 days plus, but that compared to what some families went through and are going through, it's nothing. It's a drop in the bucket. We ate dinner around our little camp lantern. We had headlamps for if somebody had to go in the garage or that kind of thing. So we survived that. It's no big deal. We were close enough to a evacuation warning zone that we decided, let's pack up the trunk and pack up the car regardless. That particular fire got handled relatively quickly. My kids did have to go to school. Well, let me just say their school was open on Wednesday. So we brought them to school, but halfway through the day, one of my son's schools was closed early. So it was kind of like a little bit of a scramble in that regard. But on the way to school, you're driving and it looks like just devastation. And on the way to school, we're just heading towards the fire that was closest to us before we got on the freeway. And it's just black billowing smoke. And you could see the flames. It really kind of looked like a scene out of Lord of the Rings. Like it looked like Eye of Sauron.
Yeah, the fire. The Eye of Sauron.
And my kids were, the night that we packed up, so we packed up things on Tuesday night. My kids were very, especially the younger one, was very freaked out, and sometimes it helps to like have somebody being freaking out a little bit more than you, especially your kids, to like be like, everything's going to be okay. You're like telling them and telling yourself, and even though, we weren't in real immediate danger at that point, we were still pretty close. Now that fire got handled the next day or so. But as we were packing up the car, he was really concerned and he was very, he's really, really scared. Personally, we wound up, being fine. We didn't have to evacuate. We lost power that night, and then didn't have power, for another 3.5 days. And here's the flip side of all of this is that you really find out how much you're thought of, considered, loved, cared for. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, I had people from all over the country calling or texting. And because I didn't have power, I didn't have internet, so I wasn't on social media because my phone was not even getting any kind of service. I was able to call and text, but that was it with my phone. And so that part of it, as always, I feel like the humanity does shine through, when things like this happen. And LA's on a long road back to some semblance of recovery. It's going to be a minute, and there's a lot of opportunities for people to step up. I have several friends who lost homes in Altadena and Palisades, and then of course, heard tons of stories, friends of friends, and what their experiences were like. But it was shocking because I didn't see the news for days. I went into a friend's house on Thursday night. She was like, come on over, come into the guest house, use my Wi-Fi, charge up your devices, that kind of thing. And when I walked into her house, her big flat screen TV had the news on, and my jaw like hit the floor because I hadn't seen these images except for a couple of stills connected to like an article or something. I hadn't seen
wow,
all of what was going on. Like, just so it was,
interesting.
Watching, it was wild. I was seeing it on the app, the scope of the fires and that kind of thing. By the way, if y'all don't have Watch Duty app, I recommend it. If you live anywhere near where wildfires are a situation or concern, this app is just crushing it. It's amazing. It's way better.
Well,
than
I think fire specifically, right? I believe it's a fire specific app.
Fire specific, yeah. So it's not for all potential emergencies, but
yeah, it's actually a nonprofit, right?
Yes.
And it's specifically designed for firefighters. So fire specific.
It's amazing because, I went to some of the county resources, the city resources, and their stuff is just archaic compared to this up to the minute app. And they source it from all different kinds of agencies, and it's really literally up to the minute. And there's so much information that you can dig into there, and it's really highly recommend it. Anyway, so I'd only been watching what's going on Watch Duty. Mm-hmm. And so whatever I saw on Watch Duty, some pictures or whatever, but walking into her living room and seeing what, the news, and she's like, oh yeah, I've been watching this for days, and watching these planes come in and the way that they just just skim the top surface of the ocean to pick up water. And then the precision with which they drop it onto the fire lines. I mean, it's extraordinary. The efforts that these different agencies, we received help from Canada and continue to receive help from Mexico, and all these different agencies that showed up to help. I mean, we're talking about thousands and thousands of firefighters on both of these huge fires continuing to work right now. And the amount of strain and stress, it's extraordinary. The level of coordination is mind-blowing what they're able to do. I watched one of their briefings in the morning because I watched it on Watch Duty, and it was a 40-minute briefing with all these different departments, communications, medical, all the different departments that were there, and extraordinary amount of coordination and level of dedication and professionalism. I was just in awe, honestly. So
it was amazing.
Mm-hmm. We were also lucky we did not have terrible, and still don't have terrible, air quality. The winds actually kept it away from us, where, it was making problems in other parts of the city. It was actually a good thing for where we are. It kept the particulates out of the air here. So,
and you did have a fire near you, but it was one of the smaller ones that was caught really quickly. And
I have actually two of them. One on Friday, it's about a half a mile, and then one on Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Also half a mile, not even, less than a half a mile.
But that one was like, there's a new fire. It's been contained. Right, on Watch Duty. It was like,
same thing with the one on Friday too.
Was that a blip?
Yeah, it was like fire, and again, testament to Watch Duty. I got 3 phone calls and 5 texts from people going, hey, there's a fire right near you. And I wasn't at home at that point. I was in a different part of town. I was across the valley on the other side, about a 25-minute drive from home, but my oldest son was home. And I had a friend who was like, hey, I'm jumping in the car right now to go grab your son because I'm closer to you than, and I said, I think this is probably going to get handled really quick, because the fire, by the way, was also started literally across from a CAL FIRE headquarters. So it was out. Wow. That's part of the reason that was out so fast, I think, is because they're right there. So yeah, we just had a lot of friends, check in and immediately, offer help, services, you can stay with us, that kind of thing. And that's, I think that's one of the biggest takeaways is just, how great people show up for you in times of need.
And how the city has been showing up for each other, right? That's
Yeah.
been really amazing. There've been so many sites set up. I mean, even for those of you who, don't know Los Angeles, it's a very big place. And so the Palisades fire is literally 150% the size of Manhattan. And the next biggest fire, the one over by Pasadena, is like 70. No, actually, it was close to 95% the size of Manhattan. Okay,
So
so
these
these
are
are really
big fires.
big fires. And
Mhm.
I am so far away from the Pasadena fire that I can't see any smoke. I haven't been affected by that one at all. Have you,
Mhm.
Natascha? Because I know you're a little bit.
We're closer. I could see it when it first was starting, but the wind was taking it over Burbank, which is a little further east of us,
Okay.
southeast. And so we weren't affected by that smoke at all. It
So
was
there's
the
these
first
huge areas that just have
huge.
life as normal in
Right,
between these
exactly. Huge,
fires.
huge parts of LA where, everything's carrying on as normal. My husband's works for the city of Los Angeles. He works for the Parks Department. They get activated as emergency workers in these kinds of times, like during COVID and during wildfires and when we have massive amounts of rain and flooding and things. And so his park was activated as an emergency center first, which just means that they provide services, come charge your phone, water, food, that kind of thing, have a place to hang out. And then it got upgraded to a shelter, which means people get to shelter there, right? Get to stay, that kind of thing. His park wasn't super close to. This happened after that other fire that happened at Victory Trailhead. I can't remember what they called it. The Woodley fire?
Oh,
No,
Kenneth.
the Kenneth. Yes, the Kenneth fire. When that was closer to his park, that one got handled pretty quickly. So in the meantime, his shelter was deactivated again because they really just didn't have many people show up. But in that time,
Interesting.
yeah, there was already a larger shelter happening in Van Nuys that was taking in people, and I think he literally had one person show up.
Oh,
So
wow.
they transported them to the other shelter. Yeah, so but the city itself is, responding and with the help of Red Cross. So if you're someone out there who's like, I want to do something, Red Cross is your best bet, I think, to, donate. And if you're, making sure that you're going to be giving to a organization that is legitimate and really is boots on the ground working. Another organization I would recommend is World Central Kitchen. They're also feeding the firefighters. They're feeding people who have been displaced. And they have all these food distribution sites throughout the valley.
Right.
That I'm aware of, or throughout the city. So those are two legitimate organizations that are working at
Yes.
the moment.
And then it's been amazing too. Like there's a huge place that's basically, I guess the best way to explain it is it's kind of like a football stadium size. It's the Santa Anita racetrack. And it has football stadium size parking lots. And those parking lots are just filled up with donations of water and clothing. And it's been very heartening to see everyone coming together in this way.
Yeah. So many people called my husband even before they were shelter. How can I help? How can I volunteer? How can I do something? To the point where they had to sign up, put up signs saying like, we can't take any donations. We can't take any volunteers, because you have to go through a whole process where they just vet you before you can't just be a person coming in from the street and volunteering. The city the liability there is dangerous, but yeah, you'd have to be vetted and they have to go through a whole process. So, he can't take volunteers, unfortunate. He's like, I would say, the vast majority of people are legitimate and really want to help, but they have to kind of protect people from those people who are not that.
But you can show up at places like the Santa Anita racetrack and volunteer.
Yes.
So
and I started my application process for a volunteer for the Red Cross, because this is going to be a long road for LA. This is going to be a long road. A lot of people lost their homes. A lot of people lost their jobs. People who don't even live in these areas, who maybe wait tables or work in the grocery stores. I mean, it's not just houses that are gone. It's, it's everything.
It's a whole economy.
Yeah, it's schools.
It's like the economy of it's like in a small town being wiped off the map.
Exactly.
But all the people are still alive.
Right. Yeah. It's wild. Plus, I just think about like all that rebuilding that is going to be necessary. And LA is scheduled to have the World Cup here in a year and a half. And we are scheduled to have the Olympics, the Summer Games here in 3 years. So it's a tall order. I was going to say that much.
I can't believe you just said 3 years, because in my mind, I'm like, it's 4 years away, but it is now 2025.
Yes, I know.
So it is 3.5 years away.
3.5 years away. That's right. Because it'll be the summer, right? So we got a couple months before we hit the exact 3-year mark. But yeah, it's felt a ways off for a while, where you're like, oh, we're going to have it in 5 years. We're going to have it in, and now it's like, ooh, it's closer.
Well, so here's a picture I have not shared online, which is, I don't know if people can.
Oh, your ring light is giving, your ring light's.
Light glare. Let me see.
It's just glaring. Yeah. So it's hard to see.
So this is how close the fire was to my house. And so there's my husband packing up the car. There's our neighbor's house across the street, and there's the fire over it. And I know it looks like the house right behind my neighbor must be burning, but no, those flames were 3 miles away.
So wild.
But that's how big they got and how scary they got. And so
same with us. I'm just going to show you a picture of the end of our street, what it looked like as I was driving the boys to school that the morning of. Yeah, there it is. So this is the end of the street. Also ring.
Oh wow, yeah.
This is the end of the street. So that's where I make a turn to get them on the freeway to go to school. But yeah, that's the end of our street.
So which
you can see that the little like red flames, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
That's why I was like, this is like Lord of the Rings. This is crazy. It's like Mordor.
Yeah. It was and as you mentioned, your youngest was really stressed. That night when my daughter saw those flames, she was almost immobile as we were packing up the car. Like, I had to hug her and say, look, we just need to get the car set so we can get out of here. And so we didn't have to evacuate.
Right.
However, if you've been following me, then you know that I have my mom, my mother-in-law, and my 100-year-old bedridden grandmother, who all live very close to me and who we help support. You know, we're in that sandwich generation. And so my mother-in-law has been evacuated now for 9 days, and she's with my mom. And so when the flames were as bad as they are in that picture that I held up, and for people listening to the podcast, I'll have to put the picture up somewhere, because it really looks like the house behind my neighbor must be on fire, or there must be a fire in the back of my neighbor's yard. That's how crazy looking it is. And I said to my husband, I was like, who knows what's going to happen overnight? You know, the first 3 days of the fires, the Watch Duty app, I turned the notifications on because I wanted to get alerted in the middle of the night if something happened.
Same. I did the same. Yeah.
And so they were just like going off. And usually I have 0 notifications on my phone because I don't want to be reacting to my phone. So I was very much aware of all these notifications. And I said to him, we're not going to get any sleep tonight with all the notifications going off, especially if we're here, because our first stop is going to be where our 3 moms are.
Right.
So why don't we just go there?
Yeah.
So that's what we decided to do. And it was actually there was a really frustrating experience, because we had been told by a hospital near us that they could take my grandmother, because that was our first concern, was how my grandmother's completely bedridden. She's 100 years old. She has no upper body strength. She has no core strength, so she can't even sit in a car. So she needs a gurney, an ambulance. And, you know, there are only so many ambulances available. And so we called an ambulance. They came, they saw my grandmother, and they said, well, what's wrong with her? And we're like, well, she's completely bedridden and she has dementia, and, you know, she can't do anything for herself. And they said, okay, but what's wrong with her? And I'm just like, what do you
need more wrong with her?
Right. Like, we can't just take her anywhere. She won't be comfortable. You know, she needs to be able to be in a bed where her diaper can be changed, you know, all these sorts of things. And they said, no hospital will admit her. until you're in the evacuation zone. And I said, okay, so when the evacuation comes, you can guarantee you're going to show up here? Oh, no. You have to put in another call, blah, blah. I was like, well, that's why we're trying to plan ahead. So clearly in the emergency situation, they need to do something like kind of like boarding a plane. Like anyone who needs some extra time can board now.
Right.
They need to do something like that for evacuation because it was ridiculous. And, however, on the other hand, it was also kind of a load off my mind because my grandmother has never had anyone care for her but our immediate family and the person that we've hired to help us.
Mm-hmm.
And I can only imagine how frightening it would be to suddenly be thrust into, it literally made me burst into tears every time I thought about it.
Yeah.
And it's making me tear up now. And so it was kind of a mixed blessing because we hadn't, the people who had been calling us to say, hey, you can stay with me. We hadn't been mentioning my grandmother. And then it was kind of like, and we have my grandmother with us as well. And all of you, and I say all of you because Natascha was one of the people who said, you can come stay with us. All of you said, and bring your grandmother.
We'll figure it out. Yeah.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Because we were not just me, my husband, and daughter. We were me, my husband, my daughter, our 3 moms, and our 3 60-pound dogs. So it's a lot to think about when you're thinking about evacuating that many bodies.
Right.
Really. So it was good also just to go through that whole thought process because now in the future, like we have another plan. Like I have a camping cot. I always tell people when it comes to emergency preparedness, your planning is only as good as the last emergency that you prepared for.
Right.
And I've never had to think about moving my grandmother. Before.
Yeah. So yeah. Right.
Because this only has, she's only been bedridden now for 2 years and we haven't had an emergency. So now at least like I have some thoughts around what I would have to do in order to move my grandmother if an ambulance was not available. So yeah, that was really crazy. And my mother-in-law still is evacuated. We're hoping she'll be able to go home tomorrow. But on a phone call last night, I heard that they're trying to figure out how to stagger re-entry so that there's not just this flood of people going in at the same time. But all of those people in the evacuation zone, you might not, you all out there might not have thought about the fact that they've had no power. And so all of the foods in the refrigerators and freezers are gone and, getting gross.
Yeah.
So,
so that happened with us. We had to, our freezer stayed colder longer. So I just started moving things from the fridge into the freezer and then just was like, well, whatever goes bad, goes bad. There's only so much we can do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Ice cream for dinner again.
We did eat the ice cream. The kids were very on Wednesday night. I was like, guys, this is already very soft and it's going to be soup in like a minute. We have to do it. I'm sorry. We have the emergency requires that we eat this ice cream, so we just put it on the table, get 4 spoons and just, dessert is served.
Okay. So my question to you is, maybe we could consider this the second part of our podcast, although we should probably wrap it up pretty soon, but what have you done to take care of yourself during this and or to create some sort of normalcy? Like what were you doing during that to kind of keep everyone's mental health in a good place?
That is a good question. I haven't really thought about that. Like it was just kind of, again, we did not have even close to the situation that a lot of people have. So there were aspects of, not having power, especially at night when we're all eating around. It felt like we were camping. One of my kids was like, let's play a board game, At that point, my husband and I
we did that.
Like, yeah, because we had no electricity. And, and it was like our family sometimes would watch like an episode of The Office before everybody went to bed, on the weeknights sometimes. And so the kids were just kind of having like a little family time thing and playing a board game. So we didn't go ahead and play an entire board game because my husband and I were pretty tired. We were like, hey guys, how about we just go to bed early? Mommy and daddy. And because, it was so dark in the house, everybody was like, okay, that sounds good. as far as anything else goes, it definitely helped me see where we're unprepared, you know? I mean, because we have go bags, I have, you know, but this was, we have like always, you know, a go bag in every bedroom and in the cars for, I've always thought earthquakes, you know, these are, you know, so, but just, you know, we have flashlights and that kind of thing, but there were things that I had to dig out of the camping bag, tubs that I was like, maybe this should just be out of the camping tub all the time. And then when we go camping, I'll put it back in, you know, for convenience sake, it had been something that just lived in those tubs. And that was just a couple of the things that like, maybe this should just be out, you know? So as far as like that peace of mind, like you said, that the last emergency helps you get prepared for the next one.
Yeah.
As far as like self-care goes, I mean, that is a good question. I haven't really thought about for me per se. And for the kids, just, you know, just getting an opportunity to talk about it, you know, and talk about how we're safe and we've been lucky and we're most likely not going to have to evacuate, but just to be prepared, and it's better to be prepared, that kind of thing. Having those conversations with them to just kind of like ease their mind a little bit.
Well, I think the other thing too that's good, at least for our kids, because the age they're at, you know, like our older kids are teenagers, you know, for them, I feel like this has been good just in case they were alone when something happened. I feel like it gives them some increased resilience in terms of thinking about an emergency and just recognizing how stressful it can be, and that the first step is calming yourself down enough so that you get into action mode.
Right.
Because you can't just, you know, stand there and keep feeling stressed.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, that Tuesday night when that popped up near us and my friend was on his way to get my son just in case, I called him ahead of time and I said, hey, there's a fight, like there's probably going to be fine. But you know, you're home alone with the dog. I just want you keep your, because he'll come home and like takes his shoes off and, you know, that kind of thing. I said, I want to just make sure that you are dressed and you have your shoes on if you have to leave suddenly, you know, so just make sure you have he has an Apple Watch. That's how I was calling him, you know, and make sure we have like a little emergency chargers for those watches just in case their watches die rather when they're out and about. So I was like, grab your your battery pack, make sure your watch is on, make sure you have shoes on, just in case you have to leave quickly. And then I called him back 2 minutes later and was like, the fire's out, no big deal, you know? But yeah.
Well, and to that end, as I was unpacking everything we packed up, I wrote everything down. And I'm going to be typing this up because, and this is something that we also put on our how to plan for camping list that Natascha and I created. And if you go to our website, to our blog, you can find that. But I don't only write what I need to pack. I also write where it lives, because not everything's in the same place. We don't all have space that we can just dedicate to emergency preparedness. A lot of these things are just in everyday use, or they're in our camping kits, or you know, whatever you're talking about. You know, you have photo albums stored here, you have valuables stored there, whatever. So writing where everything is, because I said to my husband and daughter, do you know where all these things are? And they were like, of course not, because you're the keeper of that knowledge, Mom.
Right, of course. Of course, yeah. That's really smart as far as like writing where it is, because yeah, everybody be like, oh, I don't know where that is. Mom, where is that? And what if I'm not around, right?
Yes.
What if I'm busy finding other things, right? Like, so.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So something to think about is write down your evacuation list and where everything is. And then the other thing is and I'm going to put this up as a QR code. If you saw any of the images from here, then you know that some people got stuck in traffic jams and had to walk away from their cars.
Yeah.
And again, that's not something that you always think about. You think, okay, I'm just going to pack up my suitcases and put them in my car. Well, if you're just having to walk away, can you carry everything you just put into your car?
Right.
And so I would highly recommend getting these rolling duffel bags, and I am unable to grab it right now, so I'll put it in the show notes. Look at it later. We have these 2 3-foot long rolling duffel bags, and they have the telescoping handle. And so each of us would have a backpack and something rolling. because people were having to just abandon all the evacuation stuff they had packed because they couldn't carry it.
Right.
Out.
Yeah. And then watching the news footage of those cars getting bulldozed because they needed to move them out of the way. If you do have to abandon your car, leave your keys in your car.
Yeah.
They do that so that the firemen can move it, or personnel can move it, and your car may not get bulldozed, so that the fire trucks can get in there. Yeah. So that's just a little helpful hint that I learned that last
I know. Who knew, right?
I never thought about. You know?
Yeah, and also,
like, my keys are in my car. Please don't destroy my car.
Yeah. Put your keys in your car, and also, if you can, if you're on the edge, like pull up onto the shoulder off the road, because it was like nobody had moved off the road. So they
just packed.
It was like 3 deep. They had to bulldoze off the road.
Yeah.
So those would be my 2 big takeaways. In terms of getting some normalcy, even as the fires are still happening right now. As many of you know that I have this commitment to doing sunrise hikes. For many years, it's been 30 sunrise hikes. I've upped it to 45 sunrise hikes, but the area where I hike is been closed because of the fires.
Oh, right. Of course.
And so we've actually just been doing the hike on city streets, but we've been shooting for the same amount of steps and also the same amount of cardio benefits. However, we have been wearing masks because this is not like a campfire where it's just wood being burned. There are chemicals, there are plastics, right? So everyone who has a pool, their pool chemicals going up that were in the garage. All the paints that people keep in our garage, right? All of that's burning.
All of it.
Not to mention all the electronics.
Right.
And then so I've heard that pulmonologists say for at least a week. I've also heard 3 weeks you should be wearing a mask. One pulmonologist said this is the sort of thing that turns into cancer 15 years later, like the World Trade Center, right? All the people that inhaled all that collapsed building debris. Because again, right, like asbestos, fiberglass, whatever, just in the air.
Resins, plastics, like you said.
Yeah. So I did a hike today. I did one on Tuesday. So I got in 2 this week. So that's what I've been doing to keep my self-care, getting in movement, getting outside, talking to friends. So important. No, it's not exactly the way I would do it ideally. However, no one can take care of yourself but you. And it's so important for my mental health to do these walks. And so that's one thing I've been doing. And then another thing I've been doing is I've been doing a lot of baking.
Oh, yay. That's fun.
Just because it makes me feel good. So, in times of and we've been playing a lot of board games. I've been shutting off the news. I said, okay, you don't need to watch every single second of coverage.
Right.
About
this. You're like, we've got, at that moment, you're not in danger.
No.
Yeah.
No, and they say in brain science that our brains cannot tell the difference between the things that we watch and the things that we experience. So if you're watching a fire, your brain is releasing all the stress hormones as if you were in the fire.
Oh yeah, everybody's on edge, really on edge. This is why, I'm very grateful for people stepping up and reacting on Tuesday, but I think everybody was just like, like this is, that's what my friend was like, I'm in the car on the way to get him. I'm like, okay, I think we could just take a step down.
Take it down.
But everybody's on edge. It feels somewhat similar to the early days of the pandemic when we really didn't know what was going on.
Absolutely.
How it got transferred and all that kind of thing. And you're really on edge. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a great way of thinking about it. Many people have said it feels like the beginning of the pandemic. So those are the things that I've been doing to maintain my mental health and my family's mental health. Like, even it's funny because some of these more complicated board games that you play when you're more than 2 people.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hilarious how my family will be like, oh, it's so much work to set. And I'm like, it's not so much work to set it up. And then 5 minutes into the game, we're all cracking up.
Right.
Which is so good for your mental health and so good for your immune system, having a great time. So make that little bit of effort. I just don't when my family fights me on something like playing a board game, I just don't even react. I just set it up like we're playing. We're going to play. It's happening. It's happening.
Yeah.
So doing things like that have really been great. And yeah, my 2 main takeaways: write your evacuation list, write where everything lives on that list, and get yourself some rolling duffel bags.
Yeah, we just used regular suitcase roller. So if you have that, like just make sure
Yeah.
that you have. I mean, we have like a giant one. So we have like a regular size one and a gigantic one that we never travel with because it's always over 50 pounds. So we don't even bother. So we have this gigantic suitcase that we really are only ever going to use for emergencies.
Yeah, no, it's perfect for that because, one thing that we did pack in case we were going to have to evacuate for real was I did pack our sleeping bags and our tent.
Yeah.
And those went into the rolling
too, because I thought if we're going to wind up in a shelter, who knows what they've got for, keeping you comfortable and keeping you warm at night. Like we throw sleeping bags in there too, because if we can help conserve resources, as far as
other people
maybe that blanket needs to go to somebody else,
Exactly.
Yeah, so we definitely just threw those in too, because you just don't know. Or if we wound up having to go to a friend's house, at least we had sleeping bags in case they just didn't have enough, space on their, in their guest room or whatever. So if, we were lucky. Again, we were very lucky.
But that's where the rolling duffel is great because just a rolling duffel alone can take up your tent, your sleeping bags, your sleeping pad. And these are small hiking tent, right? This is not a giant car camping tent.
Right. Yeah.
But because I have a small hiking tent, I was able to put all that stuff into one of the rolling duffels. And so, so things to think about. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Be safe. Be prepared. Be safe.
Yeah, be prepared. And next week, we're going to talk about the fresh start effect, which is kind of related to what I pulled today, the card I pulled. A year from now, you'll wish you had started today, Karen Lamb. We'll talk about the fresh start effect because even though we're already a few weeks into January, at least in Los Angeles, it feels like the new year was just yesterday.
It really does feel like. And so far, most of the people I've talked to said 2025 sucks.
Right. Right.
They're like, wow, what a year. Amazing.
We've seen the trailer. We don't want this movie. Yeah. Well, be safe. And if you want to take your planning skills to the next level, consider taking the Harness the Power of Planning workshop. It's available on demand at tinyurl.com/HPOP on demand, all one word. That's tinyurl.com/HPOP on demand. We'll show you how to plan your day, your week, your month, your year, your life, and help you to start prioritizing yourself and your goals right now. Dream wild, wild dreamers. Thanks for joining us for the Harness the Power of Planning podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe wherever you listen.